This is CBY, Christian Broadcasting of Yakima, your local Christian television station, bringing to our valley quality Christian programming for more than 40 years.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for Good News in the Valley, your local Christian news magazine. Now, first you'll hear from the president of the Stop Trafficking Project, which is an organization that is actively involved in working towards an innovative and collaborative effort to end domestic child sex trafficking across the United States. Then you'll want to save the date for Life Choices of Yakima's upcoming event so you can help support this ongoing pro-life ministry. Next, we have information about the four-time Grammy Award-winning duo For King and Country that is coming to Yakima in September, so stay tuned for the details. And finally, Heartland Bible Baptist's Men Quartet will close us with a song. Now, our first guest is Russ Tuttle, president and founder of the Stop Trafficking Project. Russ will be sharing the mission behind this ministry as well as Amy's story. For it was at her request that Russ share her story in an effort to save others from the evil of online predators that target children.
I'm Russ Tuttle, founder and president of the Stop Trafficking Project, and our ministry vision is to end domestic minor sex trafficking before it starts by disrupting the exploitation of vulnerability. And one of our strategies is we go into schools and churches and we do education for students. I got done recently with a middle school presentation, and a little girl in 6th grade walked up to me, and I could see the choke marks around her neck where her 8th grade boyfriend had choked her out the day before because it was something he had learned through pornography. Is he a bad kid? Well, he accidentally stumbled onto this scourge of pornography when he was in 1st grade. And this was now his learned behavior. He really didn't know anything else to do. And that's why our vision is to recognize the role that pornography plays in sexual exploitation of our children in America and in this crime that we call domestic minor sex trafficking. Pornography is this engine that's driving, that's feeding sex trafficking in America. And I talk about pornography from the perspective of 10 P's. And the 10 P's look like this. Pornography prepares perverts, predators, and pimps to prey primarily on children for purposes of pleasure and profit. Tragically, children in America today are in demand. There's a sexual appetite for children amongst those who are depraved. The Bible talks about the depravity of mankind. And we are seeing such depravity in our nation today, as largely the church has kind of neglected our duty to stand up for issues of morality and for biblical truth. The average age of first-time exposure to pornography in America today is around the age of 8. And 80% of all pornography is viewed through a device like this, through one of our smartphones. Now, these are amazing devices. I'm not against technology. In our organization, the Stop Trafficking Project, we say this a lot. Technology in and of itself is not necessarily the enemy, but technology is creating tremendous complexities in the lives of our families, in our churches, and our schools, and our communities. Cell phones have become such an important key, and yet there are 3 groups of people that I want you to understand who are preying on our kids through these devices. There are, tragically, perverts and predators, and in the crime of domestic minor sex trafficking, what we call pimps or traffickers. Technology has now become the primary vehicle where our kids are getting in trouble. And I want you to understand that. Parents, do not let this become a convenient babysitter. There actually is technology you can use on your technology to keep you safer from technology. There are all kinds of apps. There's all kinds of different things parents can use. But that's just dealing with the tangible. We're dealing with the spiritual. We're dealing with the root of this issue. And the root of this issue is a demonic, demand-driven business where mostly adult men are preying on our kids, and it's primarily happening online. And I'm going to tell you why that's happening and where kids are most vulnerable. They're vulnerable through apps. They're all vulnerable through the gaming system. If it has a chat feature, I don't care what the technology is, we are finding kids are being groomed through that. I recently got done with a school assembly, and a 7th grade girl walked up to me, and the first words out of her mouth was, "Mr. Teller, do you like my sweatshirt?" It was a hoodie. I said, "I really like your sweatshirt a lot." She said this. She said, "Well, my best friend just gave it to me, but she's dead. She died by suicide last week. We buried her on Saturday." I'm at this school on a Tuesday morning. Her best friend has died by suicide the week before, buried on Saturday. On Monday, a package comes in the mail to my new friend standing in front of me from her friend who had died. In the package is the sweatshirt my new friend is now wearing on this Tuesday morning with a letter inside from the friend who had died. And in the letter, she wrote this letter and she said, "I'm going to die by suicide, and here's why. But I don't want you to forget me. And I know you've always loved this sweatshirt, so I wanted to buy it for you so you would never forget me and always remember me." In the letter, she begins to unpack how she met a guy online. She's a middle school girl. There were desires and dissatisfactions in her life that she was sharing. This guy pretended like he was the same age she was. This is a common pattern. He sent pictures of a boy the same age. You see, it's really easy for these perverts, predators, and pimps to go online, find pictures, create a new account, and then pretend like that's who they are. Such deception. This little girl fell for it. He then sent her pornography. And what began to happen, this little girl experienced that for the first time, and now she's in this emotional online relationship, and she's at that age where I know what I'm doing. We hear this all the time from our kids. The tragic reality of her story was this man enticed her to meet in person. He was an adult male. He had nefarious intentions for her. He did horrible and unthinkable things to this girl, and she's unpacking it in this letter that she wrote to her friend. There was no trusted adult in this little girl's life, and so she said, "I'm going to die by suicide," and the way she said she was going to die by suicide is exactly how she died. And the reason for that is this, because the level of depravity that this man took her through, he groomed her through her online device, he met her in person, he did unthinkable things to her, he took pictures and images and videos of what he was doing to her as he molested her, and then he began to advertise her online. She became a victim of domestic minor sex trafficking. In the letter, this little girl unpacks and says, "I don't know what to do. There's nothing I can do." She felt like there was only one way out. And so she died by suicide. As my friend is telling me this story, she's hugging the arms of her sweatshirt given to her by her best friend as though she's trying to be really close to her. She had the strings from the hoodie. She had both the tie strings in her mouth in the corners, and she's kind of gnawing them as she's weeping. And then she read this from the letter. Her friend wrote her this. She said, "Please forgive me, but I've given your name to the people online as another girl who might be willing to take her clothes off and send naked pictures too." You see, one of the tragedies is for a lot of kids today, there's this desperate need for acceptance, and what they're finding is acceptance online. And some of our kids' self-esteem and self-worth is based on how many likes and shares they get. And here's what they're finding online. The more inappropriate, the more risque, the less clothing that they put on their images that they share online, the more attention they get and the more likes and shares. I recently had 11 girls come to me at the end of a school assembly. They were in 11th and 12th grade. And they walked up to me, and you're going to cringe when you hear this word. They said this: "We feel empowered taking our clothes off, sending naked pictures to men online." In that moment, I was asking the Lord for wisdom, clarity, guidance. Nothing shocks me anymore, but it angers me. Within 15 minutes, as the Lord granted favor and wisdom, I began to talk to these 11 girls. Within 15 minutes, 9 of the 11 are openly weeping. They're rolling up the sleeves on their sweatshirts, showing me the cutting marks on their arms. They're engaging in self-harm. You know why? Because they're not being empowered. They're being abused. They're being exploited. Big focus of our ministry is to help people understand that what kids are experiencing online is it's all about 3 words. It's all about the exploitation of vulnerability. There are people out there with nefarious intentions looking for vulnerabilities in our kids to exploit, and they're finding creative ways to do that online. And our kids are going, I know what I'm doing. This is an amazing device. This is where I'm finding meaningful relationships. Within 15 minutes, 9 of the 11 are weeping. They begin to talk about how they are entertaining suicide. What an honor for me to have been there in that moment. You see, God lined that conversation up months in advance, knowing I was going to be there in that school. He lined up the conversation months in advance for the little girl whose friend had died by suicide the week before, is now standing in front of me, scared because there are people out there online looking for her too. The tragic reality is, here's what's happening. A lot of times we have this myth that a white van pulls up onto a street and grabs a kid off and throws them into a basement somewhere, and they're tied up to a radiator and they're being raped for profit, and that's what sex trafficking is. That's not how it's working in America today at all. It's happening to good kids who attend church, who play sports, who are living with mom and a dad at home. But you know what the vulnerabilities are? And a lot of kids involve the foster care system. We know vulnerabilities involve poverty. We know vulnerabilities involve sexual abuse that's happened in the past. We know the issue of pornography is huge and rampant. But I want to challenge you with the kids that you care about. Because here's what we're finding over 57,000 students. Kids are lonely. This current generation is the most connected generation ever, and yet it's one of the loneliest generations. And guess what? There are people out there who know that's a vulnerability that can be exploited. We do public presentations of public schools for grades kindergarten through 12th grade. Age appropriate, different content, different presentation style. Imagine how I felt when a little girl in 2nd grade walked up to me and showed me an adult dating app where she had connected to 17 adult men who knew she was in 2nd grade and trying to get her to take her clothes off and send naked pictures. What an honor, what a humbling experience to know that God had ordained months in advance that we would be there in that moment to talk to that little girl to make sure she did not actually follow through on those requests. It's about the exploitation of vulnerability, our vision to end it before it starts, to end that exploitation, to end domestic minor sex trafficking before it starts by combating that exploitation of vulnerability. This is the first time in a media format that we're going to share a legacy story with a girl named Amy Robinson. Amy Robinson is a girl that our ministry's been working with for nearly 8 years. But her tragic story starts when she was around the age of 12. And it's a heartbreaking story. And as you continue through this broadcast, I want you to look intently at the pictures that you're about to see. And as you see this, I want you to be in prayer for her family. Because the legacy story, we trust, will have an impact that's immediate, but also long-term influence in communities throughout America as we bathe her story in prayer. Nothing of any impact in our ministry happens without prayer. Amy Nicole Robinson was born August 25, 1994. Amy was such a good softball player that college scouts literally were keeping an eye on her at the age of 10. Her progress was amazing. In fact, her nickname as the star player on the softball team was Commander of the Field at the age of 10. That gives you a little insight into her personality. Very type A, very take control, very energetic. Had the smile when you walk in the room, lit up an entire room. But at the age of 12, she met someone online who she thought was the same age she was. What she didn't know is he was actually a 21-year-old drug dealer with incredibly nefarious intentions for her. And so he exploited her vulnerabilities. One of the vulnerabilities was this. As they communicated back and forth through various social media apps and gaming systems, she told him, I'm adopted. He said, don't tell your parents. How about if I help you figure out who your birth parents are? And he roped her in as he begins to take her down this very deep, dark road of online manipulation. It wasn't long until they met in person at a mall. And soon after, she was for sale as the victim of domestic minor sex trafficking. Amy was trafficked for sex from the time she was 12 years old until a few short weeks before her 18th birthday. On the screen right now that you see are two of the points that Amy has wanted students to know for years, and then she wants you to know today as well. And I would encourage you to pass this on to students that you care about if you're an adult watching this. Number one, she said this: one bad decision can change your life forever. And the second thing is evil comes nice. There was a time in Amy's life where she was doing really, really well. She had gotten out of the life. In fact, the drug and alcohol addiction that had been forced on her at the age of 13 was completely gone. She had clarity. She was dreaming dreams for her future. Meeting her and assisting her during those days was absolutely pure joy. There was a lot of laughter. And in regard to those drug and alcohol addictions, she said, you know, when it's forced on you at the age of 13 and it continues through your life, part of it when you're a victim of domestic minor sex trafficking is this: it's not really a choice. Will I use this to help me cope with what just happened to me, or what I know is going to happen the next time that person walks through the door? But Amy reached a point after doing really well where she insisted on doing things her way. Didn't matter what we said to her. She ended up in a very toxic relationship, and she gave birth to this little boy that you see here, Jordan. Amy loved children. And this little guy, Jordan, was her motivation to get her life in order, make something really, really positive out of all the bad that had happened to her. But Jordan drowned in a swimming pool. As you can see here in this picture, the community turned out to support Amy and her family and to let them know how much they loved and cared for them. But tragically, not long after Jordan's funeral, Amy gave birth to little TJ. But he died as well not long after this picture was taken. So after years of unthinkable harm and having lost 2 of her little boys and having had 7 forced abortions between the age of 13 and 17 as a victim of sex trafficking, our dear Amy ended up in the hospital with 5% heart function. As you see in this picture, she was clinically dead on the morning of her 21st birthday. But you know what? God had mercy on Amy. He brought her out of that. I'm convinced it was because He didn't want her to perish. You see, she had never fully surrendered her life to Jesus yet. After a really long recovery, Amy received what's called a mechanical heart. Technically, it was called an LVAD. She could never come unplugged from those 10 pounds of batteries that you see there on the screen that ran the little motor that operated her mechanical heart. I think this would be an appropriate time to just hear some of Amy's story from herself directly. So watch this video of Amy.
My first encounter was when I was 12 years old, and Great Mall was a huge place where kids got to go get dropped off by their parents and have fun. So the mall was kind of a cover-up, and there I met a guy who was a large drug dealer in Olathe, Kansas, and he had other girls, and he took me and got me high for the first time. And from there on, I was not only addicted to drugs, but I was addicted to money. So I got into this Tahoe on rims, and I was wowed, of course, because I'd never seen anything like that. That's what you see in rap videos. That's what you see in the movies. And it was real, it was in front of me. And his brother liked me, and so he asked me to come sit up front with him and go around the block. I'm adopted, and so I never really knew who I was. I was always searching for who I really was, and that's where my need came in. I became that pretty girl that rode around with him, who carried his drugs for him, who also made the other side of his money. I was not only a prostitute for him, I was a mule. He would always promise me that basically this life would never end, you know, that there's so many dreams and so much money and big things that I could do with this because of my looks, because of my body, that I could overachieve. I could achieve more than any girl. I always aimed to make anybody and everybody happy. Didn't matter what it took from me. As long as I was being rewarded and told that I was doing a good job and that I was pretty, that's all that mattered to me. I'm very simple. And that's what they pry on nowadays. They look for simple. They want a girl that's beautiful and knows she's beautiful. And that's all she needs, to be reminded. It's less work for them. My parents finally figured out what I was doing, so things got harder. But I was addicted to the money. I was addicted to the drug. I was addicted to the life by that point, period. I was arrested when I was 17 in Prairie Village. I was stung through an operation where they called girls off a Backpage, because Backpage is what I was on. So when I got there, there's 4 cars outside, so I knew it wasn't right. But I was done. I was tired. I was sick. And I just wanted to go home. I didn't talk. I wouldn't tell them who I was. And they ran my fingerprints to see I was a minor. And they took me to the hospital, and then they took me to JDC. And there I met the federal officers that saved my life. It was a big step to not only admit that I was being trafficked, but to admit that I had been abused. I had been pretty much raped, abused, used. That everything that I grew up thinking was a lie. So I struggled. I struggled with who I was, who I had been, what I had been through, what I had done, until I found September, and I found Russ, and I found light, and I found hope, and I found people that wanted to know what happened to me so that they could use it to save other kids and save other girls and make them understand that life, there's no ending, there's no dream. It's all just a fantasy. And for 3 years, they stuck by my side until I found God. And I found God in the Antioch Church. And when I got baptized, I realized that God doesn't care what your past is. You have your story, you have a walk, you have a testimony. He gave me testimony. He gave me love. He gave me a story that allows me to open up a world for other people to understand that is a secret world. It's a world that nobody talks about. Once you start walking with God, it's a little bit easier to understand. It's a little bit more meaningful.
Soon after this video, Amy went into some very dark places. And I hate to say this, but she completely turned her back on God, and she walked away from God deliberately. But there were a lot of people pulling her. A lot of really bad people with really nefarious intentions. And Amy paid a very heavy price. She paid that price physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. But guess what? God never walked away from her. I'm going to fast forward to this past May 2021, May 10th. KU Medical, downtown Kansas City. It's a long story, but it culminated in this prayer that I was able to lead Amy, and I want you to listen to this prayer as you look at Amy's picture. Amy prayed this: Jesus, please forgive me my sins. I've lived life to please myself and not you. Thank you for dying on the cross so my sins can be forgiven. I do believe that you rose from the dead so I can experience eternity in heaven with you and my boys. Please take control of my life and help me to please you. I'm tired of living on my terms. I accept your love and forgiveness, even though I don't deserve any of that. But because you love me, I can forgive myself and others. She had thousands of people to forgive who had harmed her and done unthinkable things. And Jesus forgave her. Amy died this past June. It was Father's Day, Sunday morning. Her celebration of life and graveside service was on Saturday, June 26th. And you know what? Amy wants her life and her story to count. Our ministry never re-exploits the exploited, but our ministry is determined to keep her legacy alive. We are grateful that Amy is now a full-time resident in the loving arms of Jesus. There's no longer any pain. She's no longer in suffering, and she no longer has to worry about her past catching up to her. It's simply because she lived such a great life? No. It's because of God's grace and mercy to her. The same grace and mercy extends to you and to me even right now in this moment. You want to know what her greatest regret was? Not surrendering to Jesus earlier in life. Our ministry is going to continue to pursue greater things with her story. Her life motivates us, and I trust it motivates you. On the screen are a few ways that you can contact with us, connect with us. We have an app online. We have a website. The number you see there on your screen, you can just text that number. It takes you all that information. And I simply want to ask you this. Pray for our ministry, the Stop Trafficking Project. And we go into the darkest areas. God shines the light. Some people love the darkness, but the only way darkness can be driven out is if we as believers choose to shut the light off. So let's keep the light on. God bless you.
Now, Amy's story is heartbreaking, If you would like to help support Russ and this ministry in an effort to help protect children from ending up like Amy, I encourage you to please visit their website. Next is Life Choices of Yakima's annual event, Life is Beautiful, a night of comedy. So mark your calendars and join Life Choices for a night for life at the Yakima Convention Center with Derek and Julie Tennant of the Love Chromosome on Friday, October 1st. Social hour starts at 6 p.m., followed by the program at 7 p.m. Any questions, please call Life Choices at 509-248-2273. Now, four-time Grammy Award-winning duo For King and Country are coming to Yakima. Let's take a look.
Step into the music. We can rise up from the dust and walk away. We can dance upon the high. Young and old, black and white, rich and poor, there's no divide. Hear the mighty and hear the powerless. All the people say,
Well, that concludes our program. Thank you for watching, and may God bless you, and may God bless and protect America.
What has happened to a nation who used to fear the Lord, to a people whose foundation was built upon God's Word? We've allowed the world's opinions to chart a different way, but it's time the Church of Jesus Christ should boldly stand and say,
God's word will stand against the raging tide of those who criticize and work their evil plans. God's word will stand against the gates of hell with power to prevail in the hearts of men. God's word will stand.
They can take it from the courthouse walls, remove it from the schools, teach our children that they're animals, speak against the golden rule, try to hide our Christian heritage from the public eye, but they'll never overcome God's word. They'll
God's word will stand against the raging tide of those who criticize and work their evil plans. God's word will stand against the gates of hell with power to prevail in the hearts of men. God's word will stand.
It is forever settled to evermore endure. It's the only way a sinner's heart could ever be done.
God's word will stand against the raging tide of those who criticize and work their evil plans. God's word will stand against the gates of hell with power to prevail in the hearts of men. God's word will stand. God's word will stand. God's word will stand.